Hello and welcome to Talking Live. I'm Dr. Robi Ludwig, and we have Daniel Baldwin. He is an actor and a producer, and he is directing a documentary called My Promise to PJ, which is fantastic. I watched it and I really was so fascinated and hooked immediately. Now we have Daniel here to tell us more about this very, very special project of his. And it's a personal promise. So we get to see the more personal side of Daniel and his family and friends. And Daniel, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me on, Dr. Robi.
I just was blown away by your documentary. And just like Katie, who is hosting you at this film festival in July, I watched it late at night because I always do research before my shows. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll just start it. And then if I need to watch it the next day, that's how I'll handle my research. And I really watched it from beginning to end because I was just so drawn in and love so many aspects of this film. I just am so thrilled for people to see it and just understand your vision.
You know, there's a lot of people that have seen the film and they have said, wow, that's so honorable of you to have fulfilled this promise that you made to this boy. And I have to say off the top that I did at least half of it, if not more of it, was for my own sake. I was very lost after we lost PJ. I was foundering, and I wanted to figure out a way. And my fear in the film, I think I stated a couple of times, is what happens if doing this doesn't fill that void and doesn't allow me peace. And so, and as you can see in the very last scenes, when I go back to the University of Michigan, it was the journey and what I was to learn about my faith that ultimately was the lesson for me to be learned and took me to that place of solitude about losing him.
What struck me so much, Daniel, was the intimacy of this film. Like, I found myself watching the story as it unfolded and just how honest you were about everything in the film, from getting on the scale, which I think put me into PTSD myself, and just from your medical issues and just the physical challenges, not to mention the emotional component of it. Did you feel like it was challenging to share those private moments?
Well, I mean, when I've directed feature films before, I've acted in, around 150 movies in my career. And the difference in a documentary is there's no script. So you're kind of covering everything you can, and you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, literally, I in the first 2 weeks, I blew my shoulder out, and it really changed everything that I had thought I was planning on doing. I was going to lift a certain amount of time. I was going to run a certain amount of time. And suddenly I'm thrust into 5 days a week of physical therapy because I couldn't lift my hand over my chin, more or less work out. How was I going to compensate to lose the weight that I had targeted? Because, one of the themes every time I think about the film now is how different a film it would have been if I did it at 35. I mean, do it at almost 60 and to put myself through what I did physically was far more challenging to do at that age. So it would have been a completely different film probably had I done it at a younger age. But that wasn't the case.
Well, you handled all of the challenges so well, and that's what made it so real for the audience, is that we see it wasn't easy for you physically or emotionally. And you really wanted to highlight PJ's struggle and the family's struggle in your film, and just what drug addiction can do both to a beautiful person who's addicted and the family, the intense loss and grieving for those who love someone who is addicted and can't seem to give up the addiction?
Well, it's interesting you would say that because you do have a goal or a theme when you're making a documentary. You're covering X. And so what I had hoped to accomplish on a personal level was to exorcise the demons of the loss of this boy. And what I had expected was whether it's a car accident, it's cancer, it's a stroke, or it's a drug overdose, you're not supposed to bury your child. It's an unnatural. So what happens to the people that are left behind? And that was a big crux of what I wanted an addict to watch this and say, do you understand what you're risking? It's not just your life. It's the absolute demolition of your parents, your siblings, your significant others. So that was a big goal and target that I went after as a theme for the film. What was unexpected to me was the fact that I would sit down and listen to my siblings just absolutely talk about their fear and what it was like in my own personal journey. So let's
just stop here, because I want to mention in this documentary, it is the only film where we see all of the Baldwin brothers together. And that was, for me, one of my favorite parts, because we see the small town guy and you and your brothers, even though the Baldwins are a dynasty in and of themselves, we see really what your own addiction did to the relationships between you and your brothers and your sisters, who are also in this film.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that was probably the hardest part. I shot over 60 hours worth of material on 3 cameras. So I had 180 hours of material to cut down to 95 minutes or whatever I had to cut it down to. So, but to watch the pain of my youngest sister, Jane, talking about, and I would sit there when you had a good day and I would think to myself, why can't it be like this all the time? Now, my love for my sister and her love for me never wavered during my addiction, but her willingness to involve me in her life and the years that I lost, I had to relive. I had to. Billy was very hard on me. His interviews that didn't make the film were very story related. He told 2 stories that were true actually. But having to watch them over and over and make that decision, does this help support where I'm going with the film? It was a mouthful to realize just what kind of wreckage I had put on my family. And initially the film opened with the bulls in the street, which is the second scene. It was Billy's talk. I thought it was more gripping to open in black with Billy saying, well, I was waiting for that call. We were all waiting for that call.
Wow.
To acknowledge and sit in front of your younger brother, who I was the one that always protected him and took care of him when he was little. And now to have him, this big movie star looking at me saying, yeah, we thought you were dead. We thought for sure we were going to get that call. And my prayer was, you didn't kill somebody else, that it was only you that was going to die. So here's my brother saying, I'm pretty much accepting I'm probably going to get a call that my older brother is going to die of a drug overdose. I just hope he doesn't kill somebody in a minivan, with his family in it. That's powerful stuff to have to watch,
Yes.
So there was a lot of self-reflecting in the editing process for me, particularly in those portions that were from my family, my siblings.
And for Alec to say that he couldn't have a relationship with you at one point, and at that point you didn't understand why he couldn't be with you because of your addiction, that the addiction was causing this kind of separation and rift.
Well, the strength of his sobriety, for him to know that it did not matter, it's God, my sobriety, and then my kids. Because without God and my sobriety, I wouldn't have my kids, or I wouldn't have anything. So particularly when you're an addict. So for him to have that kind of strength, listen, I'm sure there were nights when he went, man, maybe I should just go see him or see, but he knew better, that I had to want it and that I had to do what I had to do. And I used to resent him terribly. I'd be like, I live 5 miles from this guy and I never see him. He never asks me over.
Mm,
But you know what? I'll never forget. I said it in the movie. He looked at me and he went, "You use cocaine. I don't have people in my house that use cocaine
yeah.
around my kids and my wife." And he goes, "Yeah, no, you determined that by your addiction." And I had to own that.
You're so, what also I found so incredible is you were not defensive, which really showed me you did the work. Because when someone is defensive, they're not quite owning all of the different aspects of themselves that could have caused pain in other people. And you certainly got through whatever you needed to get through to hear just the impact that addiction has on the people that you love, and making a commitment to move into the future differently. What did PJ mean to you?
Well, when you look at someone and you watch their path and it's similar to yours, there's the pain of the time you wasted in your own personal addiction or whatever it could be, a job, it could be, but you watch someone making those mistakes and you go, man, I could save this guy a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of pain in life by giving him what was so freely given to me. And so, with PJ, he was very charming. He was very friendly and funny. And I mean, I really did. I loved him, so he was more of a mentor son. I was more than was my son really, or the really close uncle, and so
Yeah.
I think part of what was so devastating to me was PJ had 3.5 years sober. We've been down this road, through a few treatment centers, many charges legally that I had to try to help him with. And I never saw it coming. I didn't think it wasn't even in the conversation anymore. He was now going to be someone that I could call when I had a 30-year-old or a 25-year-old kid that I needed him to come help me put him in recovery, because it was so freely given to him from me and others. So this wasn't the way the script was supposed to end.
Yeah.
PJ and I had talked about a lot of running with the Bulls and traveling and, opening maybe a rehab together. But I was so caught off guard by it. It was literally the epitome of the word. It was shocking to me.
Yeah, it sounded like it was just like a sucker punch in the gut. And just to put it out there, drugs are always dangerous, but especially now with fentanyl, someone could think they're using something that is okay. And I hear about all of these deaths that happen to these young kids who don't know what's in the drugs that they're taking, what's laced with the drugs that they're taking. So it's just very sad what's going on out there. And I think PJ's story is very powerful, because it sounds like, death was not in his plan either. But when you're a drug addict, you don't know what you're taking in your body.
No, it's funny. I'm looking at this is where we put our vitamins in. So I want you to picture a brick this big, a big brick. And that brick is put in a bowl, and they smash that brick up into as close to powder as they can. And then they take a fistful of fentanyl and they throw it on the brick and they mix it up. Now, this is not being done by a chemist. This is not, you're weighing the amount and weighing the amount. So you can get a bag like that can have 500 grains more fentanyl in it because it was in the corner of the bowl or whatever. And now 10 more grains of fentanyl could immediately kill you. 10 grains. So salt shaker and go, that much kills you.
Right.
Imagine how many of the baggies that they make out of that giant brick that have 10 times too much fentanyl in them, and you're dead the minute the needle touches your arm. Like
That's
I said,
right.
this is being done by some kid in a hotel room in Tijuana. This is not being done in a lab. So these hot needles, as they cause them, are very prevalent. We're going to lose projected 75,000 to 80,000 overdoses on heroin this year. And COVID has made it worse. I initially thought COVID would have made it not, would have actually alleviated this number because people couldn't get out. It's actually the opposite. They're in more, they're bored more, they're shooting more heroin, and they're dropping like flies right now.
Yeah, the problem is often when somebody sits with themselves, right? And that just engenders or gets people to think about everything that's wrong in their lives and can contribute to self-loathing and a lot of pain. I mean, living life in part is learning how to deal with pain in ways that are not self-destructive. And it seems to me, Daniel, that one of the ways you found your both mental health and sobriety is through having faith in a God that is bigger than anything else. Can you tell me a little bit more about what religion and faith in God has done for your journey?
Well, I accepted Jesus Christ as my savior in 2003, and I wasn't sober, and I didn't, like many of my friends who had become born again, under some terrible duress. I did it because I felt like I was being called to him. And I struggled for some time because it wasn't until 2006 that I finally went to the last rehab and got sober. But in that 3 years of still using and relapsing while I had accepted Christ, I felt incredibly guilty about it. I thought that it was dufacha, if you will. You know, it was a very two-faced dichotomy for me to live in. But I remember the day that I decided, and I was in a hotel room in Marina Del Rey in LA. And I picked this hotel because it was way down in the marina and it was right on the water. So I knew there would never be cops or anyone that would bother me. And I used in this hotel quite a bit. And I had been up for several, like, you know, beyond 2 weeks. I'd been up for over 14 days using. And I started to feel this every time I smoked another hit of cocaine, my whole left arm got numb and my chest started getting tight. And I realized that I was pre-cardiac arrest, that I was actually just about to have a. And so in my addicted mind, it had one of those old clocks that flipped the panel over each minute and then flipped the hour over on a disc, if you will. So I put the pipe down right next to the clock, and I took the next hit and I put it in the pipe, and I sat and stared at the clock until 30 minutes went by. Because in my mind, if I waited 30 minutes, I wouldn't actually have a heart attack. And every time for another probably 12 hours, I sat there, and each time I did a hit, my chest would almost go there, but not quite. I was pre-cardiac arrest. And then finally I ran out of cocaine, and I was going to get on the phone to call the dealer to come to the hotel for the 15th day or whatever it was. And there was a knock at the door, and it was the manager of the hotel who I knew very well. And he said, "I'm going to give you an hour to clean up and get out." And I said, "What's the problem?" He goes, "Mr. Baldwin, please listen to me. I want you to leave the hotel. I don't want a problem. I don't want to call the police. I just want you to go." And in that moment, when I closed the door, I said, "I'm either going to get on the phone now and find someone to come get me out of here, or I'm absolutely going to die. I'm going to buy more, and this will be it." So I remember saying, I don't want my kids to read that they found me dead in this hotel room. I don't. So I went and I looked up a couple of rehabs. I called a couple in a row, and they said, "Hey, how's your insurance?" And they asked all those nonsense questions. And then I called a guy named Greg Hanley, who owned a place called Soba. And I said, "I'm in trouble. I'm using now. I've been up for 2 weeks." And he went, "Just stay right there. Go down, take a shower, go down to the lobby, and I will come get you." I said, "Well, I got to tell you, He said, "It doesn't matter." And I looked at the sequence of events. I was just ran out. My chest was hurting. The manager who I'd known I've been doing this for 2 years. "You got to go." This guy said he'd come. And I said, "God, if you can keep me from using right now and not walking away from this hotel till this guy comes, gets me, I promise you I will quit. I'll quit. I promise. And to just keep me in this seat until this man arrives." And he did. And that was it. I never looked back.
And the rest is history. And you have been giving back In fact, you just became an ordained minister. Is that right? You're marrying people?
I am. I'm going to perform my first service. I actually did it because I was asked by a couple of very dear couple, Nikki Newell and Luke Lunkenheimer, are friends of mine. They live right down the road. And they said, we're non-denominational. Nikki has people in her family that wish that this person would do the service, and my family went. And we both looked at each other and said, who'd be great? What about Daniel Baldwin? So
yes,
I said, well, I don't know that I have the power to do that. And then I looked up what I had to do, and I became an ordained minister. And I'm currently going to be registered as an ordained minister that is allowed to perform these services in New York State. So I'll be ready in time to do the wedding, and I'm sure I'm going to be a nervous wreck when I do it.
I think you're going to be brilliant. We do something called the Quick Five, and I think you're going to be brilliant at this as well. What social stigma does society need to get over, Daniel?
Society needs to get over the social stigma that addiction is a choice. It's a disease.
Mm-hmm.
It has been accepted as a disease by the AMA. And those people out there that are struggling with addiction are sick, period.
Mm-hmm. I agree. What are some red flags to watch out for in daily life?
Boy, that's a big question. Stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Honestly, one of the greatest pieces of advice I could give someone is stay in your lane. The stuff that's going on outside of you, the stuff going on around you, you can have so little or no effect on it anyway. And we spend so much time in everybody else's business. Just stay focused on the stuff that you can actually make change in, or that you can regulate, and turn most of the rest of it over to God.
I think that's great advice. I always tell people I'm a good therapist, but don't ask me to be your accountant. Right. So I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. What's the hardest you've ever worked?
Well, there's a few, I was just sharing with Isabella, my son Atticus's mom. And I said to her, the work I'm doing right now, and I have multiple businesses, but the amount of time I have spent, and it's been 2 years now, with clear-cut financial goals that I have in it, so that I can just stop, and just do films like My Promise to PJ. But I made a, and I thought it would be 2 years, and I'm coming right up on 2 years now. And I said, God, I just want to put X amount of money away, and then I can focus on these little films and stuff I like to do. And but I would say that the beginning of my acting career, when I would do 3 auditions a day, and I had to wait on tables at night, and I had to go to the gym in the morning, and I was 27 through 35, I worked my ass off. I did. And then with the preparation, believe it or not, for My Promise to PJ was one of the most grueling 5 months, not to mention the gut check. There's 3 different types of bull runners. There's the guys that start running and then dive out of the way when the bulls get close. There's that let the bulls kind of get close to them, and then they really tag along and try to keep up with them from behind them. And then there's the idiots like myself who actually run in the pack with the bulls and put their life in danger. And when they close in on you, that moment when you're being passed by the first bull and you're in the middle of a 21 foot wide street, it's a real gut check. It really is.
I'll tell you, I held my breath for that whole scene, or those scenes. It made me nervous. Just saying, just putting it out there.
Yeah. Anyone that says, oh yeah, when they started coming, my feet started shaking, and I wasn't sure what it was. It was the pounding as they got closer of their hooves on the cobblestone. Wow. Literally made your feet vibrate. And I realized, and I looked around me, I think you actually see in one of the takes where I look to my right and I see them, and then I start to run, because there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And you dive on the ground or climb up the fence, which I wasn't going to do. So Yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I'd say the three hardest. What I'm doing now, when I started acting, and this actual movie was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
I know they say never, but I could pretty much say I would never do that. That's just too scary for me. What was the last photo that you took?
Do you want me to look?
Oh, yeah. Look, you want to show us?
Okay, so the last is a video count.
Uh-huh. Sure.
So it's me driving with my girls and my son Atticus and Isabella. And I'm on a 2-lane road and I slowed down and I said, "Did you see that?" And everyone said, "What?" I go, "That object in the middle of the road." And it was this big snapping turtle. And he was crossing the road. He was right in the middle of the lane. So I backed up, I pulled over, I pulled one of these steel rods that was like a mileage marker, a reflector, and I pushed him and pushed him and pushed him until I got him off the road. I even at one point had him by the tail, but he was a big one, and they're very powerful. And I threw him into the grass so he wouldn't get hit by a car.
Oh, what a nice story. And the last question is, who was your most interesting teacher?
Wow. I would have to say my father.
Mm-hmm.
My father was, Marine, tough, but he kissed you on the lips, and he very, very bright, and all about teaching, about lessons of life. And he knew a vast amount of information about history and English and literature, and he was a very intense coach in athletics. So yeah, he was my most influential and the greatest teacher in my life.
How wonderful. I just want to mention that you won My Promise to PJ won a New Jersey Film Festival, and you and I are both going to be at Katie O'Regan's Spring Grove Caledonia Film Festival at the end of July. You're also leading the first prayer center, right? Which I'm very much looking forward to attending, and just lots of good things to look forward to. Where can people watch your new documentary?
They can go. It's on Tubi. It's on Google Play. It's coming out on Hulu and Apple TV soon, like in July. But yeah, Tubi is a great way to go see it.
Terrific. Well, thank you for joining Talking Live and our audience. You're a pleasure. And I just look forward to what you create in the future. I know it's going to be impactful and important.
Well, thank you for having me on, Dr. Robi. I look forward to seeing you and talking to you at the film festival in Minnesota. And
likewise,
my turtle video.
And oh yes, I'm gonna feature that in the show. So fantastic.
I'll send
Bye for now, and I look forward to seeing you in person in July.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robi. God bless you.